My name's Jenna Thompson. I'm the owner at Mud Urban Potters, which is a relatively new ceramic studio here in Calgary. We're a lesson-based studio, and we just turned 2. Thank you so much for inviting me here to talk about creative spaces. I'll be telling you a little bit about my story and the path that led me to opening Mud, as well as why I think creative spaces are so important. While I'm very honored to be here talking to you guys, I feel a little bit underqualified. When Brett first asked me to talk, I said yes without really thinking about what that entailed. I tend to do that. I say yes to pretty much everything, and then I'm like, oh no. I've been in some pretty awesome situations that way, but I've also been in some kind of sticky ones. So when I began preparing for this, I started by watching a lot of the old videos from the previous speakers, and that's when I realized that maybe this was a mistake. All the videos I watched were of super talented, experienced people, experts in their field, CEOs, people really at the epicenter of art here in Calgary. The only speeches I've ever given were intoxicated wedding toasts. So bear with me, I am an average Jane at this sort of thing. I have a Bachelor of Science from UBC. I'm a pretty hard worker. I have pretty good time management skills, a good sense of humor. I love sports and I love being in the outdoors. I have a great group of friends and a loving, supportive family. And all of these things combined with a little bit of luck has led me to be part of something that I think is pretty special here in Calgary. Mud Urban Potters is the reason I'm here talking to you guys about creative spaces, why I think they're so important, and more importantly, why there's not enough of them here. Creative spaces have been a natural evolution. There are countless examples over the years of like-minded individuals gathering together, focusing on artistic pursuits. Some of the more well-known of these are, going back in time, the marble quarries in Italy, where Michelangelo carved some of his masterpieces, the Café de la Rotonde in Paris, which was a super popular gathering place for artists like Ernest Hemingway, Pablo Picasso, Diego Rivera, the Abbey Road Studio in London, which is where the Beatles and Pink Floyd recorded some of their best albums. And some more modern examples are places like Google and LinkedIn headquarters. I'm sure we can all agree that we'd love to be a fly on the wall at any of those places. These designated spots allowed for the free flow of ideas, a chance to take risks, and a place where people could come together to share their skills and knowledge. The resulting body of work from these groups has had a profound effect on humanity, which has spanned centuries. Art collectives can serve as an incubator for new ideas, leading to the growth and development of new industries and technologies, which have the power to shape the world. I believe that creative spaces don't need to be working towards creating the Sistine Chapel or the iPhone for them to be any less significant. While these places are important for collaboration and inspiration, they are equally important for fostering safe and supportive communities. They provide a place where people can come together and develop a sense of belonging, regardless of their skill level, orientation, religion, ethnicity, or age. I truly believe that creative spaces are a critical part of the fabric of society where people can cultivate important human connections. The idea of community can be especially important when people feel isolated in their day-to-day lives. I think we can all agree that we've all felt a bigger sense of isolation over the last few years. My life took an abrupt change of direction because of COVID-19. In early 2020, I was living and working in South Florida. I'd spent 6 years riding horses for a family there, a random but very fun career. In 2012, when I graduated from UBC, I had a very small chance of going to the Olympics, and I didn't want to waste that opportunity. In the end, I was only selected as a reserve for the London Olympics, but it was still fun. Shortly after, I was approached by a family to ride and train their horses full-time, which is every little girl's dream job. So I didn't say no, I jumped in, and I began my life as a traveling gypsy. During a break, I was back in Calgary one summer, and a friend of mine had posted some pictures of a pottery class she was taking. I'd already been looking for a hobby outside of horses, so I messaged her to see where she was taking the classes. I emailed the studio, and a lady responded very happily, telling me she would very happily put me on a wait list, which was approximately 2 years long. Not dissuaded, I searched around for other studios and didn't find many, and the ones I found, I never heard back from. Fast forward a few years, I'd completely forgot about pottery. I was back in Florida. Has anyone here been to Florida? It's not my favorite place in the world. So I'm determined to find a hobby again. So I thought maybe I would see if I had a better luck at the Sunshine State if I could do pottery. And it turns out people in Florida want to be on the beach and outside. They don't want to be inside in a studio. So great, I got into the first place I reached out to. The studio I went into was in a beautiful park, and there were 4 separate buildings. Each building was dedicated to a different artistic discipline: textiles, music, painting, and ceramics. Has anyone here tried ceramics? It's hard, right? Yeah. I didn't know what I was expecting in my first class. I thought maybe it would be a bit challenging, but I considered myself to be coordinated, a bit artistic, a good student. Turns out I was horrible at pottery, but I fell in love with it instantly. I really had no natural talent for it. I was basically just making the most basic of shapes, and they were so heavy, I could have used them as a weapon in a pinch. It must have been the whole thing that I fell in love with. I met new people every week. Every week, some new person took pity on my poor skills and would come over and try and help me. And it soon became my haven. I didn't even want to tell my friends about it because I knew they'd want to come with me. And as much as I liked them, I loved how much the studio had become my own sanctuary. There was no baggage, no room for drama. I could be anyone I wanted to be there. About 3 months into my classes, COVID-19 arrived. There was a lot of discussion about what we would do. Would we wait it out in the sun, or would we make a run for the border? We eventually decided to return to Canada. Everyone kind of knows what happened then. Quarantine, lots of time isolated. On a positive note, there was also a lot of time for reflection. I knew I'd been struggling with my job a little bit. I felt like I was in the same loop over and over again. No pun about riding horses in circles. It was a great loop, but always the same. I was never in one place long enough to put down any real roots. But quitting a job you love is really hard. So when COVID hit, I found like the universe was handing me this moment. I made the decision. I thanked the family I'd been working for an amazing experience, and I left to see what was out there for me. I had no idea what I was going to do. One thing I did know was I loved my time at the pottery studio, and I really wanted to recreate that feeling. Back in Calgary, I looked at pottery studios again. Still no luck. Studio availability had not been helped by the government restrictions. My family, who was very excited to have me back living in Calgary, they owned an empty warehouse in Calgary. The space was a bit sad. It was very dirty and hadn't been used in years, but it had promise, and my family was very encouraging. I also knew that pottery spaces were limited. Could I potentially open my own studio? I was still very new at pottery and still not great, yet I couldn't shake the feeling. I mentioned the idea to a few people, and everyone gave me a lot of positive feedback, and many people told me stories about also trying to do pottery in Calgary and not getting into studios. A friend introduced me to Katie, who graduated from the Alberta University of the Arts with a ceramics degree and was interested in being involved. Perfect. Katie and I have now been working together for 2 years, and we laugh looking back at our first meeting where we both pretended like we had a lot more experience than we really did. Regardless, we were both very enthusiastic and had some good resources at our disposal, so we dove headfirst into a new business in a pandemic. The pandemic was a bit of a blessing and a curse in this case. Because of the occupancy restrictions, we were forced to have small classes. It gave us a little time for trial and error and to figure out what was working and what wasn't working. It was mostly harsh realities. How do you buy supplies and pay instructors when you're only operating at a small capacity? Trying to decode the government restrictions was a job in itself. And to this day, we're still dealing with supply chain issues. What I didn't expect, I'd expected these problems opening a business in a pandemic. What I hadn't expected was dealing with so many people's disappointment at not being able to do pottery. The wonderful Judith, who's Brett's partner, she helped me get my branding going. I had a website and an Instagram, but I had no formal advertising. But right away, we were bombarded with emails, phone calls, people just driving down to the studio, begging to come in and do classes. Turns out the lady I talked to all those years ago about her 2-year waiting list hadn't been lying. I couldn't believe the response we got instantly. Currently, we have 75 new members enrolled every month with over 100 active members. These members have graduated from the classes and can use the space on their own time. Most of these people had never done pottery. They'd never been to mud. They just had this innate desire to find a creative space. So much of what a place like Mud offers isn't just pottery. It's about connecting with other people and finding a community. We live in a world that values productivity and practicality above all else. Art offers a much-needed respite from the pressures of everyday life. Creative spaces allow for a designated time and location for people to embrace their creative side in an open and safe environment. In a world that we know is often isolated and disconnected, these spaces offer a sense of belonging. I know this personally, and gratefully now I get to witness it every day. With a huge effort from my family and friends, we turned a dark, filthy, unloved building into an oasis. The gutting, cleaning, and polishing of the warehouse had a cathartic effect on everyone involved and helped establish the hands-on attitude I like to think Mud is built on. It's both amazing and obvious that during such a tumultuous time, I was able to establish such strong bonds and friendships. I highly recommend inviting Katie sometime to talk from her artistic point of view of navigating her way through COVID and art school and how we came together in such an unlikely time. Even if Mud had emerged from COVID as like a practice business hadn't worked out, I still would have treasured the time I'd spent there and the relationships I'd made. Luckily, we are still going strong. I really embrace being able to witness people finding a sense of community. My favorite part of the business is when I'll overhear someone just encouraging a total stranger to do pottery. Just like, don't worry, you got this, and the person's like struggling and everyone's kind of banding together. It's really my favorite part. As well as when I can see the members making friendships, exchanging numbers, consoling and laughing with each other. Mud has truly become a sanctuary. Because I'm just a regular Jane and I'm frantically trying to run a business, I'm not aware of every other creative space in Calgary. But I know even within the ceramics community, there's some really kick-ass places. I know that these places need to be supported and protected at all costs. I'm fortunate enough to have succeeded through these strenuous times, but increasing property and rental costs are making it exponentially more difficult for people to find spaces designated for creativity. I feel a little bit silly telling you guys about how important creative spaces are, because here we all are. I feel like you guys already know how important they are. But I hope that my story of my creative quest has resonated with you guys. You're not alone. So many people are searching for this type of connection. Creative spaces are important all around the world, but I believe especially in a city like Calgary, where our climate tends to lock us indoors and increase our sense of isolation. I encourage everyone to hold on to their creative sanctuaries, not take them for granted, and don't be afraid to say yes, even if you feel underqualified. Thank you.